Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the United She Stands podcast. Today, we have a little bit of a different vibe for you. We are talking politics, of course, but we're also talking a little bit about the brain and psychology and all of that really fun stuff, or at least in my opinion, really fun stuff. And to kind of talk us through this, we are joined by Sarah Jakle. She is the founder and executive director of DemocraShe, a nonpartisan national nonprofit empowering underserved high school girls to become future leaders, voters, and elected officials. Her approach uniquely integrates brain science into civic leadership training, helping young women overcome barriers, build courage and ambition, and claim their place in public life. Previously, Sarah served as Get Out the Vote director for California Now and National Outreach Director for Field Team 6. Her passion for women in politics began as an intern at the Women's Council of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Sarah has a bachelor's from Yale, a master's in social work from USC, and a master's in public policy from UCLA. She was a 2025 Movement Builder Fellow with How Women Lead and was a fellow with Obama's Organizing for Action. This is a refreshing and truly uplifting conversation, and we may be seeing more of Sarah if you are a Ohio creator for Progress, and if you're not, you can always sign up at the link in any of our bios of our social media. Anyway, marketing over. Enjoy the episode.
Hi, Sarah. We're so excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Let's jump right in. So, what was the moment you realized that traditional leadership training was missing something really critical for young women? And how did that lead you to found DemocraShe?
You know, I don't think it was a single moment so much as a slow growth of awareness. Because working in politics, I kept seeing amazing women, incredible, brilliant women, unable to think of themselves as candidates for elected office. And the men were like, hi, I was thinking governor. So that started to really raise my radar. And then the other thing was when these women did step up into public service and do nothing other than say, I would like to run for office. Facebook found in 2020 that female candidates get up to 10 times more bullying than male candidates. And that was certainly, I think we've all seen it, with women being asked questions about who's watching the children right now, and what is your hair doing, and your clothes, and why are you not nice, and you're too aggressive. You know, Congress is 28% women right now. It was actually that back when I was looking at this in 2020. And that's unacceptable. And I thought, you know, if we're going to change this, we have to look at the barriers that are keeping women from stepping into running for office and then smacking them in the face when they do run for office, which discourages women, right? And so what if we took the evidence-based practices from psychology, and this is my social work background, that we know help people step out of their comfort zone and be brave, and also protect their radiant inner life if people are trying to dysregulate them. And we built that into how we train women to step into civic and elected spaces. And the women I was talking about this to kept saying, I wish I knew this in high school. And I was like, you know what? High school is the last time boys and girls think they can run for office equally. What if we trained women in high school that running for office is their birthright and the practical tools to overcome the barriers on that path?
I love that so much. Two huge kind of interests of mine, politics, of course, but also the brain and psychology and why people react and behave the way they do. So I'm already like super excited and giddy in my seat and really excited for this next question. Can you walk us through the neuroscience behind why so many capable young women hesitate or hold back, and why you can't just think your way out of imposter syndrome?
Would love to. And I'm going to take a very quick journey into our brain. So in the front of our brain is the prefrontal cortex, which has our rational thoughts that we're aware of, and we often think that's our whole brain. Toward the back of the brain is a part called the amygdala that connects to the whole limbic system in the body, and this is the fight, flight, freeze part of the brain. So while you are thinking your rational thoughts, your amygdala is unconsciously and constantly scanning for threats because it evolved back in cave person days when that was really helpful. Not as helpful anymore, but it's running off of old scripts. The reason why that matters is because the amygdala evolved to learn that anything unknown or new was likely dangerous. And what remains unknown and new for women? Spaces of power. The history books don't look like us. The pictures on the wall don't look like us. The rooms often don't look like us. And our amygdala is tracking those walls and tracking the books and tracking the rooms and saying, I don't know if this feels like I'm supposed to be here, even though the rational part of the woman's brain is like, I'm all in. I'm so excited. But unconsciously, it's tracking that this looks unknown and new. So if we know that, then we don't actually ask people to think their way out of imposter syndrome. Because if you've ever tried to, Ashley and Sarah, say, stop worrying, just stop worrying.
Easy.
Right? You can't. That doesn't,
Oh my
doesn't
God.
work.
If that
Right?
worked for me, I'd have so many more years left on my life, but no.
Right? So same with imposter syndrome. You can't just be like, cut it out, because it's a fight, flight, freeze part of your brain, just like worrying. So if we train women in amygdala skills right alongside the prefrontal cortex ambition skills, then we give them the ability to regulate to safety and actually go after their authentic ambition.
I love
incredible.
it.
Yeah.
It's just so great. I love it so much.
Yeah. And I also like, just back to your comment about people wishing they had that in high school. I just think that's to your point, such a critical time. And it's so important. We always talk about like that the youth are our future, like education, how critical education is. It's like this is a piece of that education. So I really like all of that. All right, let's talk about the inner best friend or inner champion practice. So what does it actually look like when a teenage girl learns and uses those inner best friends or inner champions for the first time?
So to answer that question, I first have to explain the inner best friend and inner champion.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
So if you know Dr. Kristen Neff, she is one of the foremost researchers in self-compassion. Sarah, you are nodding. I love it. Yes.
I love her.
I dove into her for about 10 years, really studying self-compassion and the research and the training and the practices. And as I was starting to teach young women, at first I started with like 20-minute meditations. Young girls do not want to sit through 20-minute meditations. So I thought, what is a way to capture this idea? And it's an inner best friend, because we're all familiar with the inner critic. The inner critic says, it's not your turn, it's not your time, this won't work out. And that's all very evolutionary brain, right? Back in those days, you needed to think over and over about what might not work to stay alive. But in 2026, that's not as helpful. However, it's really difficult to change the inner critic, just kind of force her over, because she's a survival instinct. She wants to keep you alive. She's very strong. But you can hack it by accessing an ally. So an inner best friend is that person, animal, gear, influencer who makes you feel seen, heard, and loved and supported. So my inner best friends are Barack Obama and my puppy dog Branch. And I would ask you, Sarah and Ashley, who might your inner best friend be?
Wow.
Man.
I feel like I want so many. Can I have as many as I want?
As many as you want. As many as you want.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Sarah,
Sorry,
are you
go.
going to pick one? Are you going to pick one?
I don't know. I
I know.
feel like literally, Sarah, I want you to be my inner best friend. Just like you know all of this stuff so well. I feel like I need the expert in my head.
I would love to be your inner best friend. I would love it. And one of the things we say to the girls when they're nervous, right, when they're facing imposter syndrome, is what would your inner best friend say? So say before I'm about to jump on a podcast that I really admire, hi, Ashley, hi, Sarah, I check in with what my inner best friend would say. And Barack Obama is like, change comes from being brave. Change comes from showing up. You believe this with all of your heart. Just be you. And Puppy Dog Branch says, I love you no matter how it goes. It can go terribly, and I will still love you. And so teaching girls to access that voice, especially when the inner critic is showing up, is really key to helping them go toward their authentic ambition and also protecting themselves when people are pushing back. And so inner champion is same concept, but a figure that makes you brave. Somebody who pushes you outside your comfort zone. Mine is Stacey Abrams and Megan Rapinoe. And like, how can you be brave? So before I have to show up at something where I'm really asking myself to be bigger than I normally am, I check in with what Stacey Abrams and Megan Rapinoe would say, and they are so encouraging. And it's just these simple brain hacks to shift from the inner critic to an inner best friend or inner champion. And the girls use it all the time. They use it before they take a test. They use it to apply to a reach college they think is out of reach. One girl used her inner best friend to apply to be an Obama fellow because her imposter syndrome said, you'll never get it. So many people apply. So she checked with her inner best friend who said, why not you? And then she won and is an Obama fellow. So they use it over and over. And what they're doing is wiring it into their brain. So by the time they actually hit the workforce, they have 5 to 7 years of asking themselves, what would my inner best friend say? What would my inner champion say? And those women are going to show up differently in workspaces, going for promotions, going for raises, because they've trained themselves to shift from inner critic to inner best friend.
Wow, my life would be totally different if I had this training or this language in high school. Like, that is truly amazing.
That's the dream, right? That like we reach them in high school with their inner best friend. And what kind of trajectory does that change in a life?
Yeah, I definitely like that. I could have used an inner best friend, like especially in high school, like that's amazing. I just love it so much. So specifically with DemocraShe, y'all recruit from historically underrepresented communities, and I think that's an amazing pillar of this company. Can you talk about what barriers the girls that you work with are facing that other leadership programs often overlook?
Yeah, so these I'm very passionate about. The first I would say is we actually pay our students a stipend to participate. So what I was seeing in politics is most early political pipeline opportunities are unpaid internships, because that's what campaigns can afford. But what that means is only people who can afford unpaid work get those opportunities. And if we truly want America to reflect all of her people, we have to know that that's a barrier to entry, and we have to address it and lift it. So we pay $15 an hour to the girls to participate. And that is part of the reason we are 70% first generation Americans who often are so passionate about our country and have to work several jobs. So I am so thrilled that there's an opportunity for bright, ambitious women, regardless of income level, to start participating in our democracy and know that running for office and leadership is their birthright. So that's the first barrier I think that we need to address for young people. And the other barrier is we're an online program, partially because working in politics, I was seeing our states almost being siloed into different countries. And I think if we are to move forward as a republic, we have to be talking across state lines. So our girls, we have 42 states represented in these rooms. So Ohio is talking to California, is talking to Texas, is talking to New York, and understanding what the lived experience is of women all across the country, and that we can only rise if we climb together. And also understanding different lived experiences in different states. And one of the things it also does with being online is reaches girls where there is nothing like this around them. So I'm from LA. There's tons of civic engagement programs in LA. But in some parts of our country, there aren't a ton of like women's leadership opportunities or civic engagement opportunities. Some girls are very rural and you can't drive anywhere. Sometimes parents are working and can't drive people somewhere. So one of the things that has a barrier that we are lifting is all you need to do is have a phone or computer. And you can be anywhere in the entire United States of America and actually open your phone and find your sisterhood and find all these skills and civic engagement and how to get involved in local action and how to do DemocraShe Congress. And I think it's so important to recognize that locality can be a barrier. And so making sure that everybody has access equally is something that's really important to me.
Absolutely. And we need young women in rural areas involved and interested in politics. So the fact that you're addressing that barrier, and reaching out to, folks in girls in our small little home Ohio towns, I think that's great, because that's one thing that we are passionate about in Ohio, is not leaving the rural areas behind. And it's been done for years, especially in our state. So I think that's amazing that you're addressing that.
It's so important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so you kind of went there, but not quite there. So we're going to go there now. Your organization is nonpartisan. So you bring people in all across the political spectrum into your workshops and various events and sessions. How do you create real civic dialogue across political divides right now? And what does brain science specifically have to do with just why that's so hard right now nationally?
Yeah, that goes back to our friend, the amygdala, right? So the amygdala, when it's sensing a threat, goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And one of the things that I would say is right now in our country, all of our amygdalas have been hijacked. And sometimes that makes us not as effective in carrying forward our message, because when you're in fight, flight, freeze, you are not in your prefrontal cortex, which is making arguments. So one of the major skills we teach in DemocraShe, and we practice all the time before we speak to each other, is grounding. So grounding is just the simple act of asking yourself to notice physical contact, yourself making physical contact. Is it hard? Is it soft? And it pulls you out of the amygdala back to the prefrontal cortex. It settles you in your body. Because we are DemocraShe, we ground with Mother Earth, who is always beneath your feet. You never have to ask. She's always there, and you can always notice her supporting you. And we practice tying, making speeches about things we care about, advocating for issues, making a campaign speech, to grounding and checking in with our best friend. So I would say the first thing we do to encourage dialogue is teach and practice grounding. And it doesn't mean you step off your values. It just means you're coming from a centered, grounded, prefrontal cortex place to articulate what you think. And it also means you're in a place to listen back. Fight, flight, freeze can't hear. That's not something that it does. It is only reactive. And the other thing I think is in our DemocraShe Congress, where girls are proposing and co-sponsoring bills, we specifically say that we're doing a thought experiment, that before something can be different, we have to imagine it differently. So in DemocraShe Congress, it's not about tearing down the other person's idea. It's using a yes and model. Yes, this is the part of your idea that I can agree with. And here is what I would add. So for example, we had girls in a standing committee, because they're all in standing committees, which are breakout rooms. And the congresswoman from California, because they changed their name to congresswoman, the congresswoman from California said, I think we should get rid of all guns. Just nobody has any guns except the military and police. Congresswoman from Indiana said, yes, I appreciate your feeling. I get where you're coming from. And that's not going to fly in Indiana. Guns are a part of our state. Here's my yes and. I had a sophomore get a gun as a present, and I think that's too young. I think we should have an age limit for guns, and I think we should have a license the same way we have a driver's license. The congresswoman from California is like, that makes sense. The congresswoman from Michigan was like, we're talking mental health in Michigan. I would like to see this bill include mental health for people who've gone through gun violence, who are at risk of gun violence. And Indiana was like, that makes sense. California was like, that makes sense. And Michigan said, and I wouldn't have assault rifles. I don't think there's any place for them. Indiana said, yes. California said, yes. And when they brought it to the floor, that's the bill that went forward. If California was only talking to California, that bill would have looked like there should be no guns at all. It was because the girls had practice grounding, listening, and yes-anding that they built something that could actually be national legislation that would pass. And they were able to hear each other because of all the amygdala training they're doing and build something real. And that's kind of the dream.
Yeah.
These girls need to be running our country.
I know. I was just going to say, can we just plop them over into DC? I have a question for you about how, like, they go into those sessions. When they're in those sessions, do they know, like, which party each other affiliate with?
No, we change our name to Congresswoman State.
See,
and
I like
one of the
that.
things, because we are nonpartisan, we never ever talk about parties.
Yeah.
That's not something we ever do. And we certainly never advocate for people to vote a certain way. So we really try to keep girls focused on issues they're passionate about, articulating them, listening to them, yes-anding them, right? And that's kind of the idea. But it's,
I like that a lot. I was just curious because it's like, if they're not, I'm wondering if that like really helps. You know what I mean? Because they don't have a perceived notion of someone going in or whatever. But yeah, that's really interesting. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And 100%. I think that's a great like seed to plant too, because yes, we're in this two-party system there is a lot of reform that is needed. So I think a lot of that comes from kind of believing that we can be without a two-party system and kind of, shielding ourselves from these very specific labels and whatnot. So I think that's a really good seed to plant in the younger generation as well. So let's talk about what the actual pipeline looks like. How do you take a girl who's never set foot in a city council meeting or, is really interested in high school girl really interested in learning about politics in maybe a rural area and setting her on a path toward running for office, and if there's any benefits post DemocraShe?
So one of the major things we do in the program is get girls used to seeing what it would be like if all of their lived experiences were reflected in our laws, whether it's a rural experience or a different level experience. And so one of the things we do often is ask people to talk about issues they care about. And we tie it to legislation. And so even before we get to Democracy Congress, right? It's like, what legislation would you pass on this issue? And then the question we ask is, what difference would that make? What is the impact of the legislation you would pass? And they say, like, all these students would be helped, or it would change immigration, or whatever that looks like. And then we say, imagine if that were real. Imagine if you're actually a congresswoman and you pass that bill. That would be the actual impact. And then we, of course, tie it to making a campaign speech, right? So they actually feel like they're running for office. We talk about local action. How do you get involved immediately in your local community to make change? We do Democracy Congress, where you change your name to Congresswoman. We also have a whole workshop dedicated to running for office at your school. It is so important right now to see high school girls in positions of leadership. So we have a whole thing where girls who've already run are giving advice. We're talking about the imposter syndrome we feel. We're using the resiliency toolbox. Why is it important to see women in office? Why is it important to see women running for office in high school? And it's an entire 2 hours just on running for office at your school before we take the lens back out to America. And we see that before DemocraShe, 30% of girls can see themselves as candidates. And afterwards, that is 85%.
Wow.
And that's a really exciting jump, because it starts with the ability to see it, that this could be real and that you deserve this. And the rest of it, kind of comes as they get older. But we've already had 2 girls run for local office and win, which is very exciting. So you start seeing them once they pick up on the idea that this is possible, right? It plants the seed.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
I literally got chills when you said the before 30% up to 85%. Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, let's shift the focus a little bit. We've talked a lot about running for office, but let's talk about just more general civic engagement, specifically voting, because we know that unfortunately our voter turnout is oftentimes not very high in the United States. So you've led Get Out the Vote efforts on a national scale. What's the most underestimated barrier that you think there is to civic participation for young women specifically, and what actually do you think moves the needle?
I feel like I have 2 primary answers. One is a lack of education. If we think about the ballots that come to us, they're not just president. their judges, their city council members, their ballot initiatives, right? And it can be overwhelming and feeling like I don't deserve to cast this because I don't know enough. And the other thing I see with young people is, but I'm only one person. I have one vote. What does that matter? And I think, the answer to when I'm out doing get out the vote work, two things are letting people know and young people know that almost any group that they're passionate about that cares about issues puts out ballot guides. So if there's someone that you trust, they are going to have a ballot guide. And even people who've been voting for 25 years often use ballot guides, right? Because it is overwhelming and who knows which judge to choose. So even letting them know that there is this hack, right, of just finding someone you trust and then going off them if you don't have the time to do the research yourself. And the other thing I like to say is, we're on a team in this country. You are one person on a team of millions of people. And it's a step up, step back model on this team. When you have to step back, your teammate steps up. And when your teammate has to step back, you step up. And that's democracy, right? We're there for each other. We step up for each other. If someone can't make it to vote because they're taking care of a grandparent, whatever that looks like, you make sure you're there. And that's how we do this, is as a team. And it's not just one person on a team. When you think of Megan Rapinoe, right, she's a star. She needed her whole soccer team to win the World Cup. And that's how I like to think about voting, is being on a team of millions of people who equally care with you and are counting on you to step up, because some of them have to step back.
I've never heard it phrased like that. I've never heard that perspective. And I think that's very helpful, especially when it comes to I'm only one vote. I think, I don't know, just knowing that or thinking of all of us as a team, which is also like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe you're right. Like we're so divided right now, but we are all one team. I think that's really kind of the unity that we need to feel right now in our nation. So I love that perspective. I'm sure you have a lot of stories to choose from, but can you share a story of a girl whose trajectory genuinely changed because of DemocraShe?
I want to tell two, if I may.
Absolutely. You could tell 10 if you want.
One is the fancier, flashier change, and the other is the type of tiny change that I am just as proud of. So the flashier change is there was a student who had wanted for a long time to put on a conference at her school. And every time she thought about it, the imposter syndrome jumped up and said, like, that you can't do this, right? Like, this is too big. And when she got into DemocraShe, she had these skills like inner best friend and grounding to be able to counter that imposter syndrome and that inner critic. And so she actually launched the first youth reproductive rights conference in Chicago. And the second year she did it, because she stayed with DemocraShe, she came back as a leader. Our students go through the program and then come back and lead it because it's a peer-led program. The second year she ran her conference, 55 young women wrote her emails saying that because of her and the conference, they were now motivated to start something at their own school. And I love seeing that civic and inner best friend combine into that kind of the smaller but just as important change. We ask our student at the end of the DemocraShe 10-week program, we do pre-post tests and we say, has DemocraShe helped you do something that you were too scared to do before? And 93% of our students say yes. One girl wrote, and I'm going to remember this somewhat verbatim. She said, LOL, this is low key, so simple. But I went to Starbucks and ordered a drink and they asked if I wanted vanilla and I didn't know it cost extra. And vanilla costs like 60 cents, which is, not nothing. And she said, before DemocraShe, I would have just taken the drink, but I grounded and I reached for my inner best friend and I stood up for myself that was not what I had actually ordered and got my correct drink. And I was like, nugget, this is as meaningful to me as any conference because you're learning to speak up for yourself. And you're going to speak up for yourself in relationships and you're going to speak up for yourself in jobs. And that grounding inner best friend, advocate for yourself, it was on a really small scale at Starbucks. I am as proud of her as the conference, because that's the type of change in young women that I am hoping to help along.
Yeah. So I'll just say, I think that is really, really important. I'm glad you shared that, because I think that, full transparency, I'm not someone who is scared to speak about almost anything. So I don't think I realized until like I've had more experiences with different people how oftentimes women won't do that. Even just like a simple thing like your dinner order is messed up, or it's almost about that, like you don't want to discomfort or like just make it any harder for someone else. It's always like you'll just deal with it. And that is like, I think, a wildly important skill for people to have. So I'm really glad you shared that one.
Especially women.
Yes.
Especially.
That's been my experience. It's just like women are like, don't want to like ruffle any feathers or, whatever, rock the boat, even for the smallest things, which is just, it's a skill that you have to practice and do to get comfortable doing.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to start to wrap up here, but I do have one more question for you. So you've talked about the country really being at a tipping point right now. We could kind of go really down a dark rabbit hole and continue to be divided here, or we could go towards something better. How urgent does this work feel right now, and what gives you hope?
The work feels incredibly urgent in terms of tying these types of resiliency skills like grounding or inner best friend or inner champion to being in civic spaces. As we discussed before, you cannot just tell yourself not to be upset. You can't just tell yourself not to get flooded. And honestly, there are many very valid reasons to get flooded. The problem is the more your amygdala gets hijacked, the more you either go into hyper arousal, where you get stuck ruminating in anxiety, or hypo arousal, where you collapse and are just exhausted and burn out. And I don't want our empathic, amazing women to burn out. So I think training people to regulate their nervous systems with this deep compassion and with this type of empathy that also engenders empathy for others, I feel so passionately about tying that into how we step into civic work and how we show up as citizens and for each other. And I believe we have to start somewhere with this. So, DemocraShe, we've served 2,000 girls we're babies, we're 5 years old, but there's such a hunger for this that we get 7 times more applications than we have spots for, because women want to learn how to show up as their best selves while they're advocating for things that they believe in. And so I feel like what gives me hope is every single DemocraShe that steps into the world, because the other question we ask is, do you teach your friends these skills? And 98% say yes. I have taught the DemocraShe skill to a friend. I know a girl who was interning for a city council candidate and taught her inner best friend when she was going out to speak. But I think it's a ripple effect of kindness and intelligence and civic passion. These girls are deeply passionate about their causes. And so these girls give me tremendous hope.
I can't see how they couldn't. Like, this has just been so amazing to hear about. And I wish I could go back 10 plus years and do this when I was in high school, even though maybe I would have been more interested in politics then with this, but so many core things that seem to be taught in DemocraShe are so valuable outside of politics as well, and so needed just as being a woman in this century. Like, I think your work goes certainly beyond the walls of politics. So I think it's absolutely needed for humankind at this point. So, as we've just talked about how amazing DemocraShe, for the women in our audience who want to support this mission, whether they're a high school girl themselves, a mom, an activist, an aunt, what's the single most powerful thing they can do right now?
Say 2 things. One is share our application. Our website is democrashe.org, and we have a 10-week program, a 1-day intensive, and a self-directed program that people can start right now on our website for free. We would love to reach more girls, more rural girls, right? More girls. And then the other is find me on LinkedIn. And if you have any thoughts of people I should meet, people I should talk to, ideas for me, I would love to hear them. I do think we do things as a team. And so I'm always really excited to hear from people about their ideas about what I should be thinking about or people I should be connected to. So those would be my two things.
Yeah,
It's
I love
amazing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will have your website and your LinkedIn in our show notes so people can connect with you directly. And Sarah, we just want to thank you for all the work you do. As we've stated, I think several times now, it really is so important. And I know like there's interviews we do that like really leave you feeling amazing and like it's going to be all right. The kids are all right. You know, that kind of vibe. And that's how I feel leaving this. So just thank you so much. It's so incredibly important. I think, you know, more of all of everything you're doing is what we need to move towards a better future for all of us.
Thank
Yes,
you,
absolutely.
Ashley and Sarah. And thank you for the space you create on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate so much everything you do.